Hello, welcome to third grade. I am your teacher, Mr. Ritenour. Click the YouTube button below to make this video bigger. So speaking of something that will, we only have 3 weeks left of school. That's right, Sophie, I said 3 weeks. Crazy. After this, only 2 Mondays. What? I know. Well, let's make the most of our last little bit of time together, all right, boys and girls? Okay, turn on your brains. I'm ready. Today's common sense lesson. Do not play with your food. Check out this video from my favorite Christmas movie, The Christmas Story.
Meatloaf, meatloaf, double beetloaf. I hate meatloaf.
All right, I'll get that kid to eat. Where's my screwdriver and my plumber's helper? I'll open up his mouth and I'll shove it in.
Randy,
My mother was more subtle.
how do the little piggies go? That's right. Oink, oink. Now, show me how the piggies eat. This is your trough. Show me how the piggies eat. Be a good boy. Show Mommy how the piggies eat.
And isn't that just disgusting? Take a look at his face. Oh my. Okay, so let's exit out of that. There's your words of wisdom. Don't play with your food. It's gross and impolite. Okay, so last week we did a whole week on decimals. That was your introduction to decimals. Now today we are going to pick up where we left off and do a pretty heavy review to refresh our minds and to really solidify what a decimal is. So let's start with the definition, all right? Go ahead and read that out loud. Okay, let's read it together. Ready? A fraction with a base 10 denominator. Base 10 denominator. So far, we've learned tenths. So that's a fraction out of 10. And we talked about hundredths, a fraction out of 100. So let's look at our place values here. Let's start to the left of the decimal point. So the very first place value in the whole number side, see how this side is the whole number side? Whole numbers are always to the left of the decimal. So the very first, oh, I have no idea what I just did. So the very first place value, you know from way back when you first learned to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that first place value is the ones place. All right, once you move over, now you're at the tens place. So if you have 9 ones and you add 1, you have 1 10 and 0 ones. 10, right? You guys know that. This is all review from whenever you were little. And if you go one more place value over, now you're at the hundreds. And you could keep going. What comes next? Thousands. After that, 10,000s. Then 100,000s. And then after 100,000s, you've got your millions. Okay? Now, what if we wanted to go, oops, to the right. So everything to the left was a whole number. Everything to the right is called a decimal. A decimal means it is less than 1. So let's look at our very first place value right here. The first place value to the right of the decimal point is your tenths. So every single number that you put in here, every digit, is worth a tenth, 1/10. It takes 10 of them to equal 1 whole. So if I have 9/10, and I add 1/10, now I've got 1 whole and a 0 here, 1.0. Okay, so let me rewrite that using decimals. So if I have 0.9 plus 0.1, I get 1 whole. Okay, now what if I go even further to this place value? So I was at tenths, now I'm at, do you remember what comes after tenths? Well, here's my hint to you. What comes after tens and the whole numbers? Hundreds, right? So what do you think comes after tenths with a THS at the end? Yeah, you're absolutely right. Hundredths comes after tenths. Very good. So hundredths are even smaller than tenths because the further you go to the right, the smaller you get. Smaller. Right, Carson Smalley? The smaller you get when you go to the right. So let's take a look at my models. So let's just assume that this blue square right here equals 1 whole. So if I were to go back, that would be right here, this place value, 1 whole. Now, what if we just started counting to get to 1 whole? Let's do that. Let's just count by tens. Okay, so I'm going to type here. I'm going to type 0 point, and we're just going to fill it in as we go, okay? I'm going to make it bigger. So let's just start with the first one, 0.1. Everyone say 0.1. Okay, now we'll say it in word form. Say 0 and 1/10. Good, so let's take 0 and 1/10. We're going to put it right inside my ones. Okay. What if I have another one? Now my number is 0. You got it, 0.2. Let's keep counting. Let's go up another one. Let's do it. 0.3. See how I have 3/10? Because this means 0 and 3/10. I hope that makes sense to you. Let's add another one. Now we have 4/10, which is known as 0.4. Keep going. Now we're at 0.5. This is 5/10. 0 and 5/10. So let's pause here because this is kind of an important. This is a very important decimal, 0.5, because look at my picture. Look at this right here. How much of it is filled in? How much have I covered here? Did you see that, everybody? 0.5 is the same thing as 1/2. Do you see it? Half is shaded in. So whenever people are talking about 0.5, they're talking about half of a whole. 0.5. Another way of thinking about 0.5, rather than saying 1/2, in terms of percentages. What happens if you get half the questions right? What percentage do you have? You have a 50%. So let's just say this side is heads and this side is tails. See how you have a 50-50 chance? Sometimes we say 50-50. Getting heads or tails on a coin when you flip it. So that's what the decimal 0.5 means. Because you can actually say 0.5 is the same thing as 0.50. Or in baseball, if you're batting 500, it means that you are getting a hit half the time, right? It's a good average. All right, so let's undo here. Boom, 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 boom. 0.5, pretty important. Let's keep counting. Let's go up another tenth. Now we're at 0.6. Keep going. Add another one, and we are at 0.7. Add another one, and we're at 0.8. Let's pause. What fraction is 0.8? Good, it's 8/10. We're getting close to a whole. We're not quite there yet. What if we added another one? Oh man, we are getting very close. 0.9 is 9/10. We are 1/10 away. But guess what? We can't add another tenth. Because if we do, we have a hole. And we know you have to regroup. So if I were to go one more place value, this 9 turns into a 10. So now we have one whole. 10/10 or one whole. See that? Alright, I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to edit my number. 0.0. Now I'm going to count to one whole using my hundredths. And I'm going to use this guy. So each one of these is worth 0.01. So let's just start up in this corner. All right? 0 wholes, 1/100th. Notice my place value. If I put it right here, it would look like this. We just practiced that. But because I put it in my hundredths place, it looks like that. All right, so 0.01. Let's add another one. You ready? 0.02. So that's 2/100. Let's keep going. 0.03. 0.04. Add another one. And I'm at 0.05. Okay, pause. I am halfway to 1/10. You see that? I am halfway to 1/10. You kind of have to look hard here underneath the line. But this is how much I've done so far. I'm halfway to 1/10. tenth, or I'm halfway to 0.1. Let's keep going. Point 0.06 comes next, then 0.07, 0.08, 0.09. So let me add that here. 0.06, 0.07, 0.08, 0.09, and if I were to add one more, what would happen? So right now I'm at 0.09. What would happen if I added one more? Well, guess what? I can't have 0.010. You can't put two digits in one place value. So now I have to regroup. So if I add one more, which is what I just did, my 9 turns into a 10. So watch this. It turns into a 10, and this 0 is now the 1. So if I have 10 of those, I have 0.10 or 0.10. So look at that. Same thing as 0.1, right? 0.1 is the same thing as 0.10. All right. Now, I'm at 0.1. So let me go in here and edit my number. So 0.10 if I'm talking about hundredths. Let me add another one. Aha, now I'm at, how many do I have? I have 10 on the first row and then 1 in the second row. So now I'm at 0.11. How about now? 0.12, right? 0.12. If I were to keep going, 0.13. Keep going, 0.14. You just count out loud with me, all right? 0.14, 0.15, 0.16, 0.17, 0.18, 0.19, and pause. What's going to happen if I add another one? I'm at 0.19. If I add one more hundredth, I am going to be at, let's find out. I'm going to get 20 of them. So my number is going to change to a 2 and big fat 0. So 0.20. Another way of picturing that would be 1, 2 tenths. So 20 hundredths is equal to 2 tenths. They're the same exact thing. So let me write that inequality, okay? 0.2 is equal to 0.20. They're the same thing. Why are they the same? Well, because the 2 is in the tenths, 0 in the hundredths. Whenever there's not a number, you can assume it's a 0, right? All right, great job. All right, so now that I'm at 0.2, let me get rid of these guys. And let's keep going. Now I have 21, so I'm at 0.21. Let's keep going. Count out loud with me. 22, 23, 24, 25, 25. We're going to pause at 25 because this is important. What coin do you know is worth 0.25 or 25 cents? Yeah, a quarter. Well, there's a reason why it's called a quarter. It's because it is worth 1 fourth or 1/4 of a dollar. So if you have 0.25, you have 1/4 or 1/4. Pretty cool. Okay, so let's keep going. 26, 0.27, 0.28, 0.29, and one more makes 0.30, also known as 30 hundredths. Oops, I shouldn't do that and write it in purple. 30 hundredths. Okay, 30 hundredths is equal to how many tenths? 1, 2, 3. They're the same thing. So 0.3 and 0.30 are the exact same. All right, excellent work, folks. Well, we can keep going over and over and over all the way till we get to 100, or I can show you. If I have one of those and I do it 100 times, it'll look something like this. 100 hundredths. So the number right before 100 hundredths, if I were to get rid of, oh, sorry, undo. If I were to get rid of this one right here, so I've got all but one filled in. Let's see if you can figure it out before I type it. What is my decimal if I have all but one? What's one less than 100? Correct. 99. So 0.99 is the biggest decimal you can get in the hundredths. Because if you add just one more of these guys, you now have one whole. So 0.99, if you add one more, sorry, I wrote the wrong thing. You add one more to it, guess what? You're now at 100 hundredths, which equals 1. You have 1 whole square. So whenever you're a kid and you count all the way up to 100 by ones, you also, by adding the word point, could count all the way up to 100 hundredths. Crazy, right? Okay. Hopefully that journey from counting all the way from 100th all the way up to 100 hundredths, hopefully that helps you understand a little bit better what we're working with here as far as decimals go. All right, so you see a lot of decimals when you're dealing with money, but we don't have enough time for that. We're going to skip that. And we are going to move on to some US history. Last week, we spent the entire week on World War II. That makes sense. World War II was probably the most important event in the 20th century, right? 20th century means the 1900s. So what happens after World War II? Well, if you remember, World War II basically launches the United States into the world's leading superpower. And if you remember from our video, or from our conversation last week on Friday, there was only one other country that came out of World War II that was somewhat comparable to the US. Do you remember what that country was? It has two names. Starts with a R. Yeah, Russia. Russia, which back then was called the Soviet Union. Okay, they're the same thing though. Soviet Union, Russia. It's kind of like um, it's kind of like how sometimes we call ourselves America, but we're also the United States of America, the USA. Well, Russia was called Russia, and then they changed their name to the Soviet Union, and then they changed their name back to Russia. Okay, so if you hear me talk about Russia or I talk about the Soviet Union, I'm not talking about two different things. I'm talking about the same country. Okay, so what happens after World War II is the United States and Russia, two big time superpowers, right? Two very different countries. Over here, you have the United States, who believes in freedom and democracy, right? When everyone's vote counts. Over here, you've got Russia, or the Soviet Union, right? I'm going to call them the Soviet Union because that's what they were called at the time. The Soviet Union believed in communism and dictatorship. Dictatorship is whenever one person's in charge and no one gets a real say, right? So, good, evil. And I'm not just being biased because I'm an American. I'm saying the system of government, democracy, freedom, good, and the system of government, dictatorship, communism, bad. Okay? Sometimes communism we call socialism. There's slight differences, but for our purpose sake in third grade, socialism and communism, evil. Democracy and freedom, good. Okay? So, who's going to win? USA or the Soviet Union, which is called the USSR? USA, USSR. USA, USSR. Well, this balance goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth for the next 40 to 50 years. It's a time period known as the Cold War. Dun, dun, dun. Why is it called the Cold War? Well, because the USA and the Soviet Union never actually fired at each other. Instead, they fought over other countries, and lots of people died. But technically, no USA shot Soviet Union over here, or vice versa. I'm gonna get you, USA. Help me. Okay, let's look at some background information into the Cold War, and we're not going to get through all of it today, but we're going to get through some of it. We'll see how far we get. By the time it is 40 minutes, I will stop. Okay, putting myself in the corner. I'm going to clear all mine. All right, here we go. Read along with me if you want. Let's get my highlighter out. Okay. World War II completely devastated Europe. The word devastated, what does that mean? Yeah, crushed Europe. Millions died and an entire generation was left tattered. Think of like an old pair of shoes that has holes in it, tattered. Keep reading. In the aftermath of the war, two countries emerged as the world's superpowers, the USA and the USSR. The USSR was also called the Soviet Union, which we just talked about. It used to be named Russia, which is what it's called today. But evil dictator Joseph Stalin took over and changed its name. So you want to see a picture of evil dictator Joseph Stalin? I'll show you. This is evil dictator Joseph Stalin. Now, people like to say that Hitler was the most evil man in the world and killed more people than anyone else. Joseph Stalin would be very close second, if not tied with Hitler for first. Stalin killed almost as many people as Hitler did, but he was a little less in your face about it. Stalin would just make people disappear. he would send them to the coldest part of Russia called Siberia, and they would work in these prison camps, and they would never come back. They were just gone. So I'll keep reading about Joseph Stalin here, but now you can see this is what he looks like. I'm going to put him back in the corner. Joseph Stalin was a lot like Hitler because he killed anyone who opposed him. There's a name for people like Hitler and Stalin. They're called dictators. They are people who take over control of a country by force. What do I mean? Well, if someone were to say something bad about Stalin, he'd have them killed. Hitler was the same way. Anyone who opposed him, he would kill. That's just how they did things. Alright, so they're both dictators. The only difference is that Stalin was a communist. This means that everyone has to share what they have with everyone else. In America, we believe everyone has the right to decide what to do with their things. America is a land of opportunity and freedom. In a communist country, you do not have the opportunity to earn more than anyone else. You cannot be whatever you want because the government picks your job for you. You do everything for the good of the group. Joseph Stalin was not following communist rules about sharing because he lived like a king while most of the people in his country lived in poverty. You could say that the Soviet Union and the United States were complete opposites. Yes, you could. So let's pause for a second and let me explain. In theory, what communist is, or socialist, is everybody shares everything. Okay? I'm going to use some students as my example, alright? So, let's see. Who's the lucky one that gets picked? Bobby. Let's just say, and this example is totally made up. It's not true at all, alright? So hopefully no one takes offense. I'm just joking around, but I'm trying to give you a good picture. Let's just say Bobby works really, 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 really hard every single day as a farmer, okay? So Bobby's got this big farm. He works super hard. He grows all this food for everyone, okay? Well, in America, Bobby's crops belong to Bobby. If he wants to sell them to make money, he can do that. If he wants to feed everyone in his family, he can do that. Bobby gets to decide what he wants to do because he's the one that's farming and growing those plants. All right? Now, if Bobby lived in the Soviet Union, Bobby lived in a communist country like the Soviet Union, well, here's the difference. Bobby, when he's done growing all his crops and he has all this food, Bobby would not be able to decide what to do with it. He would not have the choice to sell or keep some for his family. All of Bobby's crops don't belong to Bobby in a communist country. All of Bobby's crops belong to the government. They belong to the Soviet Union. So the Soviet Union then decides how much to pay Bobby. Bobby has no say. The Soviet Union decides how much of Bobby's crops that they're going to take. Bobby has no say. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's not so bad, right? The Soviet Union would pay Bobby fairly. They would leave him enough for his family, right? Wrong. Okay, this is where communism fails. The very people that decide what to do with Bobby's crops are the same people that are in charge. And what do you know about humans? Do they want more power or less power in general? Yeah, human beings like more power. Do human beings like more money or less money in general? Yeah, more money. How about food? Do human beings want food or no food? Food. So here's the problem. The Soviet Union would go in and they would take all of Bobby's crops and they would keep more for the government employees like Stalin, the guy in charge, and he would live like a king. Meanwhile, the people that are actually doing all the hard work, the Bobbies of the Soviet Union, they were basically being treated like slaves. They did all that work and they barely got paid for what they did. And what makes communism even worse is, let's just say you have the patinas, all right? The patinas, you know what I'm talking about, right? The patinas who are lazy and don't do anything. They just sit on their mermaid bedspread and they just hold out their can and say, "Give me money," right? The patinas of the world don't even work like the bobbies. They just expect the government to give them everything. I know, right? So communism fails because it rewards people like Patina who don't do anything, and it punishes people like Bobby who work really hard. I hope that makes sense. All right. And thank you, Bobby, and thank you, Patina, for being my guinea pigs. America is the exact opposite. We believe in capitalism. Capitalism is one of the greatest things in the world. All right. Because capitalism, it all boils down to you get what you want. You are the one who gets to decide what to do. That's what capitalism is. It's called a free market or laissez-faire economy. So Bobby has the choice in the capitalism. Bobby can either sell his crops for what he thinks is a fair price, or he can keep them. Now, maybe the price isn't what Bobby wants, but he still has the choice. You always have a choice in capitalism. The crops belong to Bobby, not to the government. And if Bobby wants to sell an ear of corn for $2.50, he can sell it for $2.50. If he wants to go somewhere else and sell it to a different person for $3, he can do that. If he wants to keep it all for his family and doesn't want to share any of it, he can do that. In the United States, we believe in capitalism because what happens with capitalism is it forces everyone to work, whereas communism does the exact opposite. It rewards people for not working. It's called incentivizing. At your house, think about it. You probably have some chores to do around the house, right? What is your incentive to do the chores? Maybe you get an allowance. Maybe your parents say, if you don't do it, I'm going to whoop your butt, like my dad would say. Maybe if you do what you're supposed to around the house, you might get like a movie night or ice cream. You have an incentive to do it. You are motivated to get it done, right? Well, in communism, you don't really have any incentive to get anything done because the government is just there to take care of everybody. And so what happens is you get a lot of people who don't have any incentive to work. So imagine if your parents had some kind of communistic government in your house. You might think, oh, that's so great. I won't have to do chores anymore. Well, usually what happens in communism is if you're not doing what you're supposed to, if you're not doing any work at all, you get killed. All right, that's what happens in China. It's what happened in the Soviet Union. It still kind of happens in Russia. It's what happens in North Korea. All right, another communist government. So communism, you don't have any choice at all. Everything belongs to the government, and they choose what they're going to give you at whatever price they want. All right, so we'll pick up there tomorrow because I'm running dangerously close to being out of time. But we'll pick up there with the Cold War, now that you kind of understand the differences between the United States and the Soviet Union. And we will see what happens tomorrow. Peace out.